It's Tuesday, April 30th, 2013, live from the Techology Studios in rural Pickens County, South Carolina. It's the Techology Show. I'm Matthew T.G.
I'm Heath Mulligan.
And I'm Tony Casey. Welcome to the Techology Show, a weekly podcast featuring technology, theology, and everything in between. This is episode 201.
The odometer has flipped.
That's right. We're working on the next 100.
Yes.
Not making any promises about that celebration. It'll just have to be a surprise.
Oh,
right?
I've already got plans for episode 500.
You know, it dawned on me when we started the things we always did our numbers, we started 001. That's how we started.
Right.
We actually, we're 50 episodes away from being a quarter way to 1,000. What's going to happen when we get there?
Very good.
Boy, you know your math. I'm just saying right now. Listen, we set up a couple of giveaways for last week,
Yes.
and the way that we set this up is the first the first person that we chose would have their choice between Tim Stevens' book "Pop Goes to Church" and also Eric Metaxas' biography on Bonhoeffer, and so. Our winner is...
Guess it. Guess, guys. I'll give you 3 guesses. The first 2 don't count.
That's right. Duke student extraordinaire and former winner, Seth Cotton. Seth was in the chat room. I don't know if he's still there. Seth, just send us a Facebook message and let us know
which one you want.
Which book you would want. If you want, we have a physical copy of Pop Goes to Church. If you want Bonhoeffer, you can have that in any form, Braille, Sanskrit. We have them all.
Seriously, if he wants it in Kindle, the Kindle form, we'll send that, or we'll send the real thing.
Yeah, Kindle or a real book. And then our second winner, also
from Durham.
From Durham, North Carolina, Angela Nelson. So, Angela, if you're listening, we'll be trying to get in contact with you. And you will, whatever Seth doesn't take, that's what you'll get.
You get the leftovers.
Yeah, that's right. You get Seth's leftovers.
And Seth, when you message us, make sure you include your mailing address because we always misplace that.
All righty. Well, today we want to welcome Keith Loy to the show. Keith was born in Michigan but raised on the plains of Nebraska. It was during his high school years that his sense of calling began to take flight. After graduation, Keith began working with teens as well as going to college. On 3 separate occasions, Keith has had the privilege of working with his father in building God's kingdom. In 1999, he moved his family to Sioux Falls to plant a church. Keith has a Bachelor of Arts degree from Dakota Wesleyan University and a Master of Divinity from Briercrest Biblical Seminary. Keith's married to Kay, and together they have 3 amazing girls, Jordan, Jaidyn, and Jaksyn. Keith, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to be on. Thanks.
We appreciate you taking time out of what we know is a very busy schedule to join us. There's a lot of ways we could go with this interview. I think what we'd like to do is just start out by talking about Celebrate Community Church and give us a little bit of the history of the church and your own sense of God's leading to Sioux Falls.
You know, it's interesting. It's probably more of a... obviously God's hands in it. From my perspective, it's just amazing how the accidents and the dominoes fall. I was actually doing some speaking, probably nationally for FFA and FCA, and I found myself up in Williston, North Dakota. And the short of the story is where I met a pastor by the name of Mark Orvette.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
I spoke in his church, and he asked me if I'd like to be on his staff. And I thought he was absolutely nuts. I didn't have a clue who he was, and he just kept impressing throughout the day, showing me where my office would be. And what's interesting is, to get him off my case, I told him he needed to know I needed to go to seminary. He said, you can do that across the border in Canada. And I said, you need to talk to my father. And I knew my dad would just get rid of him. And sure enough, he called my dad through the night. The next morning when I came in to collect my stuff and move on down the road, I was heading to Montana. I asked him if he had called my dad, and he said he had. And I said, what did he say? And he said, you need to call your dad yourself. And I called my dad that night from Montana, and my dad wept on the phone. And my dad said, it's an answer to my prayers. And that began the ball rolling of being introduced to the Wesleyan Church. And within about 6 months, God began to work through my district superintendent and in my own heart, my wife's heart, about leaving Williston and planting a church. And in the short of the story, we had no clue about Sioux Falls. I've only been in Sioux Falls one time prior to, and that was when I was in 6th grade to play a little basketball tournament, which made no sense because I pretty much set the bench. Yeah. But I had no clue about Sioux Falls. Just the one statement that was said to me is there's a lot of unchurched people in Sioux Falls. And that just became a burden on my heart. And within a year, we were here.
Wow. Well, before Heath asks you a question, let me just say that we all agree that, Mark Gorvet's nuts, but in a good way.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Keith, when you spoke at the gathering in Orlando back in 2011, you actually brought people from Celebrate who were examples of God's redemptive and restorative work there in Sioux Falls. Could you share a story or two about some lives of some of those people that God has redeemed there?
Man, I could share many. One that probably just resonates in my heart right now is a little over a year ago. In fact, let me just back it up a second. Back in 2000, I was actually at one of our local restaurants here, a mom and pop one known as Perkins. And I went in there, and the manager that day, it was on shift, had a Nebraska Cornhusker shirt. And it's funny, again, how God uses things. And I responded to it just because I grew up in the plains of Nebraska, and the only thing there is Nebraska football, if you've been there.
Right, yeah.
I always tell people Nebraska is a great place to visit and travel through at night. But but I love the Huskers, and I grew up just watching a lot of their football. So I responded to it, and he and I began a relationship through Nebraska football. In fact, I was in his house on 2 occasions, invited to watch a bowl game of Nebraska before he ever came to the church in which I pastored.
Yeah.
And we just began to develop a relationship. And 2 years after that, he came to Celebrate and gave his heart to the Lord. And a little over a year ago, he was diagnosed with esophageal cancer. And the fact that he's still here today is just amazing to me. But he has been journaling from the very moment that he found that he had cancer. And every day he writes a post on there. And to watch what God is doing and the way he interacts with the Word and who Christ is, it's been amazing. In fact, from my standpoint, it's beyond anything I've ever really preached from the pulpit. To watch his love of what God is doing in his life, how God's Word has come alive, the witness that he has been for Christ. I love what he says. He says, I am saved by the big C, which means God has already healed me over the little c.
Yeah, that's great.
And I find that amazing. He is so ready to go home. And yet he has 4 children. He has a beautiful wife. And I love what he says. He says, we're all going to die this side of heaven, but we live forever when we know Christ. And he's just beckoning people to where are they at with Christ. He says, my family's going to be left behind to grieve, and the church is going to have to wrap around them and be there. He said, but this is what it's all about, that one day we're going to be home with the Lord. And it's just a tremendous testimony of what God has done. And to think that my wife and I 14 years ago came to Sioux Falls, and just the impact of what it's had in his life and what his life has impacted back to mine has just been amazing.
I wonder if you'd take just a moment to talk about how the church actually started. I know that this was a cooperative effort with another church that initially sent people over. Just give our listeners, our viewers, an idea of how many you started with, where the church is now.
We have a mother church in town called Linwood Wesleyan Church. And Bill Canan, Pastor Bill, who was there at that time, he's no longer the senior pastor there. Bill's dream was that my wife and I would come into his church for 4 months and recruit up to 100 people. Mm-hmm. And so we moved in May, began in June, and for 4 months we just began sharing the vision and literally recruited 100 people. What's interesting, within the first 3 months, 75 of them went back. But to explain that, I think they were very intentional about, they were so helpful of getting us started. But there was something about what they grew up in that church. And so they really were a wonderful part of getting us launched.
Sure.
And then went back to the home church. 25 of them are still active, a part of Celebrate, which are my heroes today, because they were the lead. They were everything. And throughout the years, obviously, they've given up some unbelievable roles to people who didn't know Christ, who now know Christ. And they've literally surrendered those roles and empowering them and allowing them to take the lead. It's just been very humbling. But that's how we began. But I'd have to add on to that those first 3 months, I got to tell you, in the first 3 years were such humbling years for me, because those people were so filled with a lot of grace. They gave a lot of grace to me because I made so many mistakes. I mean, there's things that I'd love to do different. Sure. Because God, I you know, that old adage, God had to beat a lot of Keith out of Keith, so he could put a lot of himself in me.
Yeah. Now, today, it's a multi-site campus, is that right?
Yes, it is. Yep.
How many campuses?
We have one locally in Sioux Falls and the other side, in the west side of town. It's just a little over a year old. We are very committed to trying to launch satellites in rural communities. So we just recently launched one up in Huron, South Dakota, and then we have one in Mexico.
Wow. Okay. Outstanding. You know, one of the things that Celebrate practices is TLC. If you go to their website, you see that. Now, most of us recognize that as tender loving care. What does those letters stand for in your context?
Well, and we use the same adage that in everything we just need to add a little TLC, but the T stands for to teach the word. I'm really committed in the world right now that, and I want to be careful how I say this, but it just seems that there's so much scriptural literacy going on.
Oh, amen.
And we've got to get back to the word. I really believe the words of Christ, it truly sets people free. And so we're really committed about teaching people truth, God's truth, and that it's not subjective, it's not relative, it is truly works and an authority by which we can live. So teach the word. The L stands for love the people. Love the people. We tell our people all the time, if we're going to abuse anything, let's abuse grace. We can always come back. You know, we've had people say, well, we water things down and we let anybody come, and we kind of like that because we can fix those things. I just don't want to be known for condemnation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so love the people, and then the C is help them to connect. I think everybody wants to belong, and everybody wants to be fully known and fully accepted, fully loved. And so we're very committed to helping people connect with other people.
I saw in an article, the Hope and Holiness Trust, well, the title of the article is The Hope and Holiness Trust is Sharing Hope with the Hopeless. And in that article, you said that your DNA is simply loving people, no strings attached. And you can even hear that in all three of the letters there that you were just giving us.
So how does this play out practically in a ministry setting? I know a few weeks ago, well, I shouldn't say a few weeks, a couple months ago, we had Corey Pence, and he was excited about some of the ministries that happened there at the church. Am I remembering right here?
No, yeah, you're
not your head in agreement.
Yeah,
there
yeah, yes,
I'm getting scared that I'm.
No, you're,
all right, but
yeah, I mean, he was telling us about ministries that you have for. I think the thing that he was telling us about is single moms who need work on a car. I mean stuff like that. Just finding a need and meeting a need, basically, from what I understand.
Well, you know, when we talk about teaching the word, and I don't know if I could say it's on the flip side, but the reality for me is there's that when we teach the word for us, we want a lot of application to that. I don't understand Bible study for the sake of information that it doesn't move our feet to action.
Right.
You know, to me, there is no word unless we're going to go be the word.
Yeah.
And so when we're putting it some feet underneath it, we have an incredible ministry now to single moms, and I can't even begin to imagine what a single mom has to go through, and the daily chores. I know that I met with the mayor recently because we're really trying to work out of how can we be more active in our community and be a vital part to our city. And one of the things he talked about was he brought up a single mom who every day she gets up and going to work and getting home, it's a 3-hour journey for her to get to a bus, to get on the bus with her children. When she gets to the daycare to drop her children off, by the time she gets back out to the bus stop, the bus is already gone. And so she has to wait another hour for the bus to come back to that bus stop. And it's a daily chore for her. And so there's an unbelievable need there. And so for us to putting the word into action is meeting her where she's at. Yeah. And so one of the things that we do every year is that we take all the single mothers and we have them bring their cars. We work with a local auto mechanic car dealership here, and they run all of their cars through and make sure that the tires are up, the oil's changed, the heat works for the winter, the air conditioning in summer. And that's just something we do year in and year out. We foot the bill for that. This last year, 5 of the cars would not be returned to the mothers because the dealership said they're not worthy to be on the road. So we ended up getting new cars for them.
Wow. That is awesome.
So that to us is teaching the word, putting it into action, and doing what the scriptures tell us to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, Wesley is famous for saying there is no holiness but social holiness, and a lot of times that is taken out of context and is interpreted in a different way. But what he meant was a true religion is going to make an impact on the society. I mean, that's the point that he's making, and it's exactly what you all are doing there.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, we're all in ministry here, Keith, and you grew up in a pastor's family. So you've seen ministry up close for your whole life. So how has ministry changed over the last 20 to 30 years?
You know, for me and growing up, I love the church. I was blessed with a mom and dad. In fact, my mom and dad will be here this evening. My dad is on our staff in a teaching role, and it's very humbling for me to have my dad, to think that, you know, I've worked for him 3 times, and here he is, in a sense, working for me, but I don't see it that way. I'm still working for him. I'm still learning from him. My mom and dad, you know, I never felt like I was in competition as a child with the church. You know, there's all these statements about pastors' kids and those things. I grew up in love with the church because I saw my dad and mom living out not only what he taught, but in our home. Good. And our home was a revolving door. And so to me, it was one of those things that was just a part of your DNA and what you did. And what I'm seeing today is a shift. And I want to be careful here because I don't want to sound legalistic with everything we just talked about.
Sure.
But there seems to be this sense of entitlement. And for me, a misunderstanding of what salvation is that we've surrendered who we are. You know, I'll talk to people and ask them, why do you go to a certain church? And for me, it seems if I could say it this way, I get the wrong answer. I hear a lot about what they get. I like this. I like this. I almost feel like the right answer would be, you know, I don't really care for the pastor's preaching and the music isn't my style, but it's the greatest place that I can give my life away for the kingdom of God. And there's a sense of entitlement, you know, almost what can you do for me instead of God, what can I do for you? And so, you know, that's a real shift for me because the church for us, when I grew up in the places that I was raised and fortunate to be around, it seemed the church was really a center of the community.
Yeah.
It seems there's been a shift that it's on the outside now. I heard Dr. Jim Garlow, you know, say that we are now in a state of the persecuted church. And so, but I see among God's people that it's almost that the church is like, it's like a convenience when it fits into my schedule. And I've been one to state that you don't fit the church into your life, you fit your life into God's church. And I'm not talking about a building, and I'm not talking about a weekend, I'm talking about a life.
Yeah.
And I'm real big on covenant versus membership. You know, it's not what I get. It's I'm a part, I'm grafted in.
Yeah.
And so leaving, convenience, none of those are even options. I'm a part of something unbelievable, sacred. I love what Bill Hybels said. And I agree. The local church is the hope of the world.
Yeah.
I'm a part of the bride of Christ. I'm the body of Christ, and I matter to God, and I matter to my brothers and sisters, and I'm an active part, and I find that is a great privilege and joy.
Very well stated. Some people may not know that you've authored a book. Got it right here, Clue.
And Mr. Colonel Mustard in the dining room with the candlestick. I mean, not to give it away. I hate to give away the ending of the book and ruin it for you, but wow.
The subtitle of the book is God's Clues to Facing Our Fears. Why a book on fears?
First of all, I got to come back to the statement was just made because I'm laughing because that's actually what we built the series around.
Wow.
Yes.
When you came into our auditorium, we had the library completely built on the stage with the staircase going up, and we played on that whole thing.
That's cool.
We actually opened up with, which is kind of funny, this might rattle a few, but we opened up with Michael Jackson's that whole Thriller.
Yeah.
Nice.
So we played on that whole thing, but it wasn't Colonel Mustard. It was actually
That's awesome. All right, so tell us about the book. Again, why a book on fears?
I think fear is a monster, and I think it plays out in so many ways in our lives. And I think a statement I'd make is there's too many people that are freaking out rather than faithing up. And I think Satan wreaks havoc on us because of fears of relationships, fears of stepping in, fears of failure, fears in our own finance. There's so many things. I think fear is a big deal, and God's perfect love overcomes all fear, and we can walk in those things. And so, I in the simplicity of the fact, I think it's bigger than we give it credence. And fear is if I can use the reality TV show, fear really is a factor, and it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
One of the fears you highlight in the book is the fear of failure, and there's two things you say about it. One is failure is a fact of life. Two, failure is not fatal. So could you expound on that and kind of explain the general point you're trying to get across with that?
Yeah, I think there's several ways I could come at that. There's the old adage, when God's children fall, they fall forward. So when they get up, they actually have taken ground even in the fall. The fact is, we're going to make mistakes. I mean, my marriage and my parenting, it's checkered by them. I think about how many parents, we just did this week, and I was talking and asked how many parents here have never made a mistake, and obviously no hand came up. But do we stop parenting?
Right.
There's so many things in life, learning to ride a bike as a child. There's so many things like that. We're going to make mistakes, but I think we concentrate too much on the fact that we made the mistake,
Right.
rather than the one who walks with us and the one that's teaching us through us. There's so much unbelievable things that we can learn in it. Celebrate. I share with our congregation, nobody has made more mistakes in this church than the guy you're looking at. I can think of so many things that I'd like to do, different conversations, things where I reacted and I wished I'd responded. I stop and think, boy, the least person leading this church should be me. But the only reason I stand up here is because of the goodness and the grace of Almighty God. That He doesn't leave me when I fail. He's there. He's a faithful. And I learned so much for that. And if we're willing to look at our mistakes, of our failures, if we can call it that, and realize these are some of the greatest gifts and the greatest things that we have before us, and the things that we can learn and grow, not only about who we are, but who God is. And it's in those moments. I will tell you, I think the greatest thing in the church is not our perfection, not that we get everything right. I think the greatest thing in the church is the fact that we don't always see eye to eye, that we bump heads, that we get on each other's nerves, we have different opinions, that we experience frustrations, but because of the power of Almighty God, we choose to walk in unity, and we fight for that. And the Bible says that's our greatest witness. You will know who my disciples are by how we love one another.
Yeah.
And we've got to get back to that, and move beyond those things. How many people, you've probably all heard, a young girl who got hurt in a relationship say, I'm never going to love again.
Right. Yeah.
Stop and go, really? Really? You're going to miss the incredible joy of love because of a pain, because of a failure? Boy, you miss the incredible things in life that we get. And maybe it's in the depths of those that we discover that. Let's go back to the single moms. I could tell you story after story of a woman who was struggling because of her car, who felt like a failure in love, who feels like a failure as a parent. And they will tell you, I got unbelievable amounts of cards and emails, and some saying, I am weeping tears as I'm writing this, saying thank you because of the other single moms I've met, because of the people that wrapped around, and what this church has done. So what she's saying is, in the midst of my failure, I am discovering unbelievable good, and the greatness of who God is.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, Keith, you're talking about your church's ministry to single mothers. One of the questions from the chat room is, how do you discern what ministries and opportunities you say yes to and what opportunities you say no to? I mean, there's an old saying, you can't help everybody. It seems like you guys are doing a pretty good job of that. So how does your church kind of wade through all that and decide, hey, this is where we're going to invest our resources?
The old adage, and when I say this, let me preface that, boy, have we messed that up at times.
Yeah.
I think you're going to mess it up. But I remember a pastor once said this: obviously, we want to teach people how to fish, then just give them a fish. But sometimes just giving them a fish is better than doing nothing at all.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And so we've messed that up. We've had people abuse the system. We even made mistakes and wish we could go back and do it different. But one of the things we do, even though we're in a large city, we still have an unbelievable amount of parachurch community ministries going on.
Right.
And so we have a food bank, and we're quick to send them there. And part of the reason why is because they know faces and people that are trying to abuse a system.
Very good.
And they have developed some things. So why reinvent the wheel?
Yeah.
So we work with a lot of community organizations, and we do that. We're in partnership with a lot of other churches too, and those type of things. I believe there's a variety of churches that are needed to reach a variety of people. And so we a lot of times we do start with our own, these single moms come here. We have a relationship with them.
Right.
We're invested. And so we're big about walking with them. Obviously with the car thing, we know who those single mothers are, and we're walking with them every year they come in. We get new ones. We inherit that when it gets out in the community. We get a lot more moms who want to come, and quickly we step involved and let them know that this is more than just a car. We want to walk with them, help them in being a mother, understanding certain roles in that. We understand that you have to play both parent in some ways. How can we be your church in that?
Yeah.
There's a lot of conversations that start in that, and we help them. We have people that in our empowering lay people in the church. We have incredible people with finance resources, but also have skills in how to get their finances in. So we start sitting down with them and start having dialogue, looking at your finances, what you can do, not do. They might have to live in a new location. So then we start partnering with our people in the church that own different lodging and apartment complexes. How can we work with them? Those type of things. But when you start down that road, one of the things we did a series on this. I believe that we are called to be in relationship with people, and relationships are messy.
Yeah.
And you have to be prepared to get muddy. When you start down that road, when you lead with your heart, I believe in the long run you're not going to get that wrong. You may mess it up front, but there's something about this unbelievable passion of compassion. And so we're not afraid to get muddy. We're not afraid to mess it up. We will step in. We will have the difficult conversation. We'll move into those conversations because we say right up front, in the end, we want to teach you how to fish, not just hand you a fish.
Yeah.
So we ask, what is the we want to assess what is the immediate need and what is the long-term need. Both are important.
Before we let you go, in preparation for this interview, I was poking around and was at Wesleyan Publishing House, their online store, and noticed that Celebrate puts out a lot of book studies. With that, you get material, you get a DVD. Give our listeners just a feel for what's in that. What are in these packets, these book study packets?
That whole thing started. We were reaching a lot of unsaved people, which is really important to us. That's a number that committed to the vision, and I'd even go back to when the question was asked about how do we assess those needs. Boy, vision really plays important there, because there's some things that we do not do. We know other churches that do it well, and we encourage them to go there. I don't want anybody. We're not in competition. We're in partnership with all those churches that preach the word and lift up the name of Jesus. So I think that's so important. And there's some things that we just direct them to another location because they just do it so well. And but that resources started when we started reaching these unsaved people, and they were trying to get them into the word. Again, teaching the word, is they were just struggling with understanding it. And they'd say, but when I'd come, and this isn't bringing attention to me, but they said these words to me. They said, when you preach to us, it makes sense. And I wanted to get them in the word. So what I did was we took the book of Colossians, and I went through it verse by verse, the way I sort of preach in the weekends. And our goal was that we could give them this 6-minute to 7-minute video, and they could watch it, me sort of teaching, walking them through verse by verse, and then wanting to have questions, a little packet that they could read questions to ask about themselves, and getting them into the word. And then and I don't remember how it all began, but then I got into dialogue with Wesleyan Publishing, and they asked if I'd do 5 more books. And so they actually built a participant guide now, which is fantastic. They did a brilliant job at that. And so it's just me video teaching, like through the book of Philippians, verse by verse. So
yeah,
that's awesome.
And they're about 6-7 minute vignette teachings of that.
Listen, if our listeners want to check out the church's website, where should they go?
www.celebratesf.org.
All right. Keith, thanks so much for taking time out of a busy schedule. We appreciate your time, and just God bless the work that you're doing there in Sioux Falls.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. I'm humbled. Love what you're doing.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
You referenced the conversation that we had with Corey Pence, and Corey said to us that one of the things that Keith is not going to do is he's not going to blow his own horn, and he's not going to make a big deal, as if, they're important or he's important. He has a very humble attitude. Did you notice all the way through that article, we never found out how many people attend the church?
Yeah.
It's over 3,000.
You talked about one of the questions in the interview was at the gathering, he brought several people from his church to share their story. He did the same thing at Follow. He actually brought 2 staff people from his church who kind of shared their stories, who are who were not Christians and are now on staff at his church, and actually used them in kind of the altar time. And it was of all the youth conventions I've been to, it was one of the most powerful altar times. And what was cool is what they did is they were giving each kid a key. And Keith's whole message was about, the key and unlocking God's love for you. And we had these doors, so the kids would get a key and they'd go through the door. So after it was over, I'm interviewing him in front of one of these doors. And the kids are all having their youth group time. And he and I are talking. And one of the groups was meeting maybe 30, 40 feet from us. And one of the girls in the group, they get to their little meeting, and she's like, what was all that? Like, she did not understand she didn't understand the altar call. And they explained it to her, and she says, oh, well, I would really like to do that. And so Keith, as soon as I finished the interview with him, they come over, say something to him. He goes over to their group. This is the guy that just spoke to 5,000 kids. Goes to their group, does the group time with them, then just brings that one girl and allows her to do the whole ceremony. It was.
Well,
I mean,
you want to talk about a guy who's in love with the church. I mean, you talk about like you catch a little bit of Jesus in Keith when I watch him, because like he's so excited about the bride. He's so excited about the church and how I love it.
We'll link you
good.
to an article, The Hope and Holiness Trust is Sharing Hope with the Hopeless. This is just the story of Celebrate and Keith's story personally. And again, they feature a woman who had decided to leave her husband, and she goes to church that Sunday morning, and it turns out to just be a life-changing moment for her that Sunday morning, and they feature her story here as well. So good reading, and just a great guest to have on the show. We recommend the materials, recommend the book. If you want some of the materials, the book studies that they have, just go to WPH Online.
He has a few other books too, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and they actually gave out Clue at the gathering. I think everybody there got a copy. Some of us got more than one.
Yeah, so again, go to WPH Online, all his resources and materials there. All right, time for...
Download of the week. All right. Well, let's see. Was it last time we talked about Google Music, and we talked about some apps for that? Well, Google giveth and Google taketh away. Blessed be the name of Google. One of the things that people like me are lamenting big time is the loss of Google Reader. It's not something that's making them money. I know there are lots of people who use it, including my own mother, who called me frantically, Google Reader's going away. What do I do? If you weren't familiar with it, it was a way to aggregate all the different blogs, resources that you'd use. Like I've got like a website that I love to check for free fonts to use for commercial use fonts, that they have an RSS feed of those as they put out or discover new ones. They'll put it out there. And it's just a way for me, instead of having to go to that website, to check all of that. And so every couple weeks, I go and I look through all the fonts that have come in and what do I like and what I don't like and put it there. Also, as I've got church leaders that I like to follow what they write, I've got a folder of a few different people that are all right there. Tech blogs, same deal. The Techology Show comes in, comes into Google Reader, and they're shutting that down. I believe it's either June or July. I can't remember, but it's going away. And if you use RSS to aggregate feeds, it's time to start looking for an alternative. And I would like to recommend Feedly. There's quite a few alternatives, but Feedly is one. There's an iOS app. There's you can access it right off the website. There's an Android app. They're very cross-platform in what they do, and it's way more than what Google Reader was. It's almost overwhelming right at first, because Google Reader was so simple in the way that it just had these columns that laid out stuff. There's a whole lot more going on. They'll if you want them to, try to lay it out in more of a magazine style format.
I heard that they were
But
it's not by default the magazine layout.
I think it may be. I can't remember now. I've been using it for a few weeks, and I immediately went in and customized it to do a list like Google Reader, where it was a list of things. But once you begin to become accustomed to it, it'll import all your feeds. So you just say, here's my Google account. It'll go do that, and then when Google Reader shuts down, they're already transitioning your feeds and the database of your feeds over to their servers and taking it away from Google's. There's all kinds of other groups that are trying to do this. There's some apps like Readly or Reader. There's the oldreader.com is a Google Reader alternative, but Feedly seems to be the one that is. I gave it a few weeks with a few different services to see what was the best, and that seemed to come out on top. So there you go.
All right. Time for They Said It.
It is, if I could find it. Where is that?
We can find it.
There we go.
Read my lips.
I'm going to say this again.
I've never taken steroids or HGH.
I took the initiative in creating the internet.
The Macintosh, of all the machines I've ever seen, is the only one that meets that standard.
I'm not a crook.
If you know what you're doing here,
slide out.
We all know drinking and driving is against the law. You're not supposed to do that. But they didn't say anything about driving and then drinking. You just have to be learned enough to understand the symbols of drunkenness. Richard Godby here in a video he posted of himself drinking and driving. The end result, authorities arrested him on charges of consuming alcohol while operating a vehicle and driving without a license. Source CNN.
She's not looking at me and confronting me and authoritatively directing me as a woman. A book puts the woman out of my sight and, in a sense, takes away the dimension of her female personhood. John Piper, in a partial explanation as to why it's okay for a man to read a commentary written by a woman, while still holding the position that it's wrong to sit under the direct teaching and preaching of a woman. Source, Hermeneutics.
I felt like it was a learning opportunity for me. There was a lot that I'll take from it. There's a lot that I learned, and there are a lot of relationships that I built. So I know that it happened for a reason. Tim Tebow, in response to being cut by the New York Jets. In the aftermath, he also tweeted Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. Source, The Christian Post.
On the night the news broke that the bombers were Muslim, I saw so many comment on social media in ways that were just unhelpful, hateful even. I tweeted two things to my fellow Christians who, like me, should desire all to hear the good news of the gospel and trust and follow Christ. Ed Stetzer, in an article he wrote entitled, Love Your Neighbors, Even the Muslim Ones. Source, edstetzer.com. All right, so let's just go right to the top here, the CNN story. This is one that you sent me, Heath, man, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago. And so on the surface, it's kind of funny. I mean, this guy, it's pathetic, but it's funny. He thinks he's being cool. He's drinking. He videotapes it, and he posts it online.
Right. And what he later said is that it was an empty bottle, that he was actually not drinking.
Well, he says, technically, there's water. It was just water.
Yeah. Well, so he says he wasn't drinking, but he was driving without a license, which is just like, listen, we don't advocate or promote breaking the law here on the Technology Show, but we especially do not advocate videotaping yourself breaking the law
allegedly breaking the law
and posting that online.
The title of this article is When Oversharing Online Can Get You Arrested. Now, there really is a serious vein through this article. They have 2 lawyers who weigh in, and there are other stories here. Obviously, the Steubenville, we've covered that, so I won't talk about that one. They have another guy here who the police get called in this community. I think it's in, I'm trying to find the town. I think it's Colorado. It's Oregon, excuse me, Oregon. Astoria, Oregon. And they get called to a neighborhood where 2 cars have been sideswiped. But hit and run, they don't know who it is. Well, then the police department the next day is sent a Facebook post. And the Facebook post, let me see, reads this. Whoever's vehicle I hit, I'm sorry.
Oh.
And before that, he's kind of bragging about, you know, it was just a classic drunk. That's what I had, a classic drunk. And so the police show up at his house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. And so what he says is, no, I wasn't drunk. I was just, you know, I was just...
so you all were wondering why Steve Stanley had left Facebook? These are the reasons. These are the things.
There's another story here in Montreal where the Orange Line, which is one of the subway lines, they had the idea that there are 30 stops. We're going to drink a beer at each stop, and we're going to film this. Well, by the time they get to the 18th stop, you know, and things are getting pretty sloppy, well, eventually they're arrested. And what this article goes into is what people can what law enforcement can legally do. So let's say you, Heath, you put something on Facebook and you delete that post. So it's inappropriate, but you delete it and you think, well, I'm safe. No, you're not safe because that's still on Facebook's server.
Right.
And what the lawyer talks about is their ability to subpoena that, even though you deleted it. And one person here, one of the lawyers says, if you don't want your mama to see it, then don't post it.
That's right. That's right. Well, I mean, I've heard of stories of students at an unnamed local Christian university associated with a Wesleyan church posting pictures on Facebook of a party they went to, and there's lots of drinking. Basically, things going on with this party, breaking the lifestyle code of this.
The commitment that they signed.
Yeah. And, you know, a lot of students got in trouble, and a lot of them were, like, really mad about it. I'm like, you should be mad at yourself, you idiot. I mean, not only that you did that, but that you posted it online. I mean, that's just ridiculously stupid.
And one of the things, I mean, since we started this show, one of the things that we've talked about is it seems like people still don't quite get how the internet works.
No, they don't realize.
I tell you, sometimes some of the stuff that you see that people have done, it's like people really must be clueless in some ways. Yeah, be smart about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and let's go to the last story, and that's Ed Stetzer's story.
Right.
Now, I read that whole article from beginning to end. He's going to press you, and he's going to challenge you, especially on Jesus' commandment to even love our enemies.
Yes.
But one of the things that I wholeheartedly agree is you see people posting things, and you say to yourself, "What? This is certainly not helping the gospel."
Right.
What impression are we getting? So you have an event, something that was done in hate, and then when you tweet something that's hateful,
yeah, you're just feeding it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have responded in kind, and this is what Ed Stetzer is saying, that it seems like Jesus has given us a different model and a better way.
Yeah, I would. I have. Okay, how do I say this correctly? There are people that I have seen post things on social media, Twitter, Facebook, wherever, that in my role now as a pastor, if that person came through the pipeline in interviewing them for a job, it would be very, there would be some things that I would ask them. Maybe it was some language they used, maybe it was something that they commented on, and so, I mean, technically, you could tweet something you could tweet something out about something hateful about Muslims or whatever. A lot of places you could lose your job over that because they don't want to have that as part of their business.
Yeah, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I'm watching the Today Show, and the whole issue is on social media, and can employers use that information? And so there is one lawyer who begins to talk about the legalities, saying they absolutely cannot, and began to quote law. And there was a businessman, and his response was, "You can say that, but I'm telling you, in the practical world, it's exactly what they do. They go to Facebook, they go to Twitter, and they see what's there. And if you are, if every picture of you is uncontrolled, no discipline," he said, "my business is going to pass on you, and others are too."
Right.
And is that so? The next question, that someone would be like, "Well, should the police have access to that kind of stuff?" And to me, yeah, I got no problem with it, right? I mean. Is there a legal issue there? I don't.
The article gets into that. So while some of these stories are funny, we link you to the story because you have two lawyers who are weighing in, talking about what are the legalities, what can they legally do, and the surprising thing, the value of the article is what they can legally do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about the internet, okay, and correct me if I'm wrong with the technology.
We will correct you if you're wrong.
Technology. But when you're on the internet and you post something to Facebook, that is the same thing as if I mail a letter to your house, the message is in your house. I say, "Hey, tell everybody this." Well, that message is at your house. It's my message, but it's hosted at your house. So if somebody wants access to us, they can go to your house. That's not a private message anymore.
Okay,
essentially, you're sending.
So you're talking about Fifth Amendment stuff. So part of this article covers that.
Right.
So Roselle says this. What the Fifth Amendment protects against is compulsory confessions. No one compelled them to take photos of themselves drinking and peeing. Now she's talking about those on the orange line who had this idea that they were going to drink at every stop. Another lawyer, Shear, weighs in. The problem is that people don't realize that you can't take it back. It's almost impossible to unpost something.
Right.
And this is where the article gets into these things are saved on servers. So even though you deleted it, it's still there.
Yeah.
Real quick, Tebow, again, I want to be careful because I want to put some guy.
Right.
But the way that he responded to his being released from the Jets, not one
appropriate for believers.
Yes.
Can we just put it there? I mean,
Yeah.
can we leave it there and move on?
Very good.
And
Don't say anymore.
Like,
No, I'm just saying it was
appropriate.
It's the kind of reaction a believer should have, and it just goes to say, okay, this is a guy who seems to be very for real.
And to me, I'm not as a football fan not upset that the Jets released Tebow. He did not play into their future plans. I am more upset as a fan of football that they would go to all that trouble to acquire him and then treat him, not play him, just kind of, I don't know, man. They just turned it into
He didn't say he was treated bad. He thanks God for the opportunity.
I'm telling you, had they got a guy.
You need to have a better attitude.
They got a guy playing quarterback who runs into the rear ends of his offensive lineman, fumbles the ball. I'm telling you.
That is not Sanchez's fault.
That is Sanchez's fault.
We need Tebow to help you with your attitude. My mic's falling here.
No.
All right.
That sounds great on the recording, by the way.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I
it's
apologize for
beautiful.
that. All right. So let's get to the last story here because
we're out of time, and it's the best one of the bunch.
It's the Piper story. Piper is a strong complementarian, and so to cut to the chase on that, believes that women should never be in a position where they're preaching to men or teaching men, and yet he in this article, the author, she's quoting Piper when Piper gave an explanation. He was asked the question, well, is it all right to read from women authors? He says, yeah, now that's okay, and so he begins to explain why. And help me out here. Who's the author of this article? I scanned up top real quick, but
hold on.
Rachel
Pietka. Yeah.
And part. I mean, this is a fascinating article. I am in Rachel's corner on this, and my thing is just be consistent. If you're going to hold that a woman shouldn't teach a man, then don't try to make these.
Yeah,
these
I like it. Where can you draw the line? So let's do this. What if you had a lady, she got up at the pulpit, but you put a real thick curtain there, and she had to speak through some like a voice box that would try to change. No. That would kind of lower the pitch of her voice a little bit.
It's her physical femininity.
That's what I'm saying. There's a curtain so you can't see her.
I'm sorry. Okay.
There's a curtain so you can't see her.
Okay.
And there's a way to alter the pitch of her voice so that it's down. Is it okay to sit in the congregation and listen to her speak? Like, where do you draw the line on this? This is so stupid.
What if I went to his church to preach, but I read a sermon written by a woman?
Ooh, there's another good.
I mean, that's the whole.
Well,
you know what I mean?
And
that no one would know,
right?
Because I would plagiarize.
This article gets into the history of women in the 1800s when they would have to write, but a male would have to read. In the audience, a male would have to read their article. They would have to sit. They could not stand because to stand would show their femininity.
Listen, if you want to listen to a great series of messages, go to lifechurch.tv, Craig Groeschel's church. Go download the series. It's 3 messages preached by a lady named Christine Kane. I think she is amazing. I love Christine Kane. And what?
Go finish
okay.
The chat room.
Anyways. Amazing, like a great series. I would listen to her preach all day.
I heard her one time because you did the
just
DVD
all day.
Church,
I mean, just a fantastic
very
lady.
Good.
Well, even Billy Graham's daughter,
Ruth Lots. Right?
She she doesn't call herself a preacher. She calls herself a teacher. Tony, your brother in the chat room says, so what you're saying is if someone is wrong, they should be consistently wrong.
Well, he just needs to be consistent.
That's right.
And Rachel in this article, I mean, here's the thing where I think that she raises a great question. Mm-hmm. She says, I'm surmising that Piper would be he would not want to see women sexualized on billboards, on television,
right.
in any kind of media. And the reason is because you are drawing attention to them in a sexual, physical way. But then she says, but that's exactly what you're doing, Piper. you're drawing attention to the physical.
Yeah.
You are reducing her to simply her physical feminine qualities.
Yes.
And so while you shun this other stuff, you have the same attitude when it comes to preaching and teaching. So great article. I mean, just
we just want to see some consistency. And if you read this whole article, it is just a very well written, very, very well written article. And if you have a problem with articles that women write, I will read it to you. And
we'll do a recording for whatever that news
so
thing
I'm fairly
app
certain
that you had the other day.
Yeah. So I am 100% positive John Piper has not read this article.
Okay, so now real quick, we have a little bit of time here. I'm excited about Google Now coming to iOS.
Yeah.
Google's been around for a while.
What I'm excited about is the next person who can do the jailbreak trick that'll make that the default Siri. Like when you press and hold, that'll come up. Yeah,
that would be cool.
Yeah.
But see, I use both on iOS. So yeah, I agree with you. If they could in a jailbreak make that the default.
Because what it was, there was a jailbreak tweak that would make just the Google voice search the default. But if Google Now, and all that, to be able to get directions easily, it was kind of wonky, there at first. But I think that this, it's exciting. Google Now is pretty cool.
Yeah,
it's kind of creepy. Again, Google giveth and Google taketh away. So when I think about, all right, they're taking away Google Reader. I just talked about, upload your 25,000 songs. What happens when they say we're done?
I thought the same thing.
We're done. We're not making money off hosting your songs. We're just going to shut this down.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder too that they've kind of tied this into their Google Play Store where they sell media, but surely they're not selling media in the way that Amazon sells media.
No.
I don't know.
No.
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I think if you lived in an Android world,
perhaps.
maybe so. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's not Double Twist. That's Amazon Store built into Double Twist. I'm just thinking.
I downloaded, the Google app and for Google Now, just before the show, and right now it's more like Google Never because it's just not giving me anything. Basically, it shows me I have no life. There's nothing.
It will learn your life.
It showed the weather, and I accidentally deleted.
Sometimes Google Now thinks that I work here at your house, Tony, at the Technology Show studio. It's like to get to work today, it's going to take. Okay.
Alrighty. Well, let's talk about what's coming up in the future.
Good stuff.
On May the 14th, we have Dr. Bud Bentz with us, longtime professor at Indiana Wesleyan University, retired professor, but couldn't be with us until May because he's teaching at Indiana Wesleyan University. So I'm not quite sure. He taught for years in the religion department. I assume even his teaching right now is in the religion department. So looking forward to that. Also May the 21st, we have Dr. Rosaria Butterfield on the show. She is the author to Secret Thoughts of an Unlikely Convert. Fascinating book. I actually read her story on Christianity Today, and had to buy the book, and was one of those that I started reading, and 5 hours later you're done with it. Like you can't put it down. It is such a great story, and part of the reason we're having her on is to talk about Pastor Ken is his name, Presbyterian pastor, and how redemptive he was in her life, and hopefully we can just learn a few things. June the 11th, we'll have Luke Gilkerson on. Luke Gilkerson is with CovenantEyes.com, and so there are. I actually have someone that he uses Covenant Eyes, and I'm the person he reports to.
Web filtering service and accountability program.
Right. Yep. And so Luke's going to come on and talk to us about just kind of the history and how it got started and what they do. Yeah.
We've also got a couple other things in the works, nothing that we can talk about yet, but even just this morning we were tossing around some ideas for some shows, and just a lot of fun things.
Right
There's
now
so
we have
many
a lot
cool
of
people.
invitations out. Yeah, we do. All right, Heath, I'm just wondering where, right now for our millions of fans are wanting to know where they can find you online.
Please follow me on Twitter at Heath Mulliken, Heath Mulliken on Facebook. My goal, 5,000 is the friend limit on Facebook. I want to break that. I want to reach that limit, and basically so I can tell people I have too many friends.
Okay, so you won't turn anyone down, right?
I will not turn anyone down. There's this one lady I'm about to unfriend because she shares everything,
we don't want to know.
Like the story we talked about today.
Yes.
Exactly. MatthewTG.com for me, where when you go to my website, you can see that well, that you're there, and and if you follow through, you're not going to find me in a lot of places. I'm just increasingly just scaling way back in.
Yes.
I find that the effort that I put into the social media aspect of our show and of the church have taken priority over my personal life.
Sure.
I mean, it's just becoming less and less. But anyways, you can go there. You can find me. You know, there's a link to LinkedIn if you'd like to have a producer. You know, if you want to pay me the big bucks to quit the Techology show and come produce for you, that's where to go.
He's not available.
And I'll go be his humble helper. Yeah. All right, you can find me at AKC64 at leeching. At Twitter and Facebook. Oh, excuse me, I'm dying on air. If you want to do further research on anything we discussed today, you can find all the links to the stories we covered at our website, thetechologyshow.com. If you want to contact us, send your emails to thetechologyshow@gmail.com. Let me say Seth Cotton sent us a great email and actually recommended someone to get on the show, so I'm going to follow up on that. So, emails like that we appreciate. Better yet, if you want to call us, call 3049-THEOLOGY, 304-986-5649. You can leave a message. We may even play those comments on the air. As always, thanks for joining us. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Adios.